welcome to the 73rd episode of First Things First. Is it 73?
73,
yes,
Jenna.
73. I'm Jenna Wolfe. Hall of Famer Cris Carter, Nick Wright.
Yes.
Nick does a wonderful thing where he tweets out right before every... Are you going to count this down for the rest of the duration of the show?
Hopefully around year 8 or 9, I might forget one, but hopefully we get there. That's the idea.
All right, we got 8 years of this before he forgets one.
That's the plan.
Good. You're looking good, man. You bounced back.
I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a little under the weather.
Fans, but he's getting ready to bring it.
But CC has told me that in professional sports, there are no days off. We had a little bit of a conflict about this situation. So I'm fighting through it. I don't want to make anyone else sick. I think I'm past the worst of it. Yesterday, Ray Lewis, I almost coughed on him. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. Got through it, and now we're good to go.
He almost got pinned. All right, well, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
The Packers should be getting someone else back pretty soon. That is one, Aaron Rodgers. This could have a fairy tale feel if it all goes the Packer way. Rodgers making his first start in 2 months Sunday when the Packers at 7-6 play the Panthers with one of the toughest defenses in the league. So the plan is simple, guys. Start the game, play bananas, win all your remaining games, smile for the cameras, and make the playoffs for the 9th straight year. What am I missing? It seems so simple. Here's Rodgers on his return.
Obviously, I think there's an expectation of the way I play on Sunday and how I'm going to play. I enjoy those expectations. I enjoy meeting those or exceeding those. That's what it means to be a leader in this locker room and the quarterback of this team is going out and performing and doing your job. Hopefully it gives a lift to some of the guys, but I'm not coming back to save this team. I'm coming back to play quarterback the way I know how to play it, and hopefully we all raise the level of our play collectively and find a way to win these 3 games.
Nick and CC, we use the phrase run the table like it's nothing, but Nick and I didn't play professional sports, and I would imagine for an athlete that is just a lot of pressure to put on something. We just have to run the table. It's like we just have to get A's the rest of the way, and we're just going to ace the course. Is it unrealistic to think that the Packers with Aaron Rodgers can indeed run the table, win out, and make the playoffs?
It would be unrealistic if they had anyone else in the league at quarterback. When you have the single best player in your sport, except for baseball, I would imagine, where it's one guy can't make that type of impact every single game, then no, it's not unrealistic. It might be, it is more likely than not that they don't do it. Like, they're not a better than 50% chance, but it's not unrealistic. When Aaron Rodgers is the best football player alive, Aaron Rodgers at his best, and I'm not saying we will get peak Aaron Rodgers immediately, but Aaron Rodgers at his best plays the position like Dan Marino at his best, like Peyton Manning at his best, like Tom Brady at his best, as well as anyone has ever done it. When you have a guy at that position that has reached that level, nothing's unrealistic. We've seen this Packers team be 4-6 and make the playoffs. We've seen Aaron Rodgers miss weeks 9 through 16. Come back in week 17 in a must-win and make the playoffs. We have not seen the Packers, you mentioned it, Jenna, miss the playoffs in the last 8 years. The all-time record is 9. So that is a sustained period of excellence due to number 12. So nothing short of it being a sunny 82 in Lambeau this weekend or in Green Bay is unrealistic to me for anything involving Aaron Rodgers.
And as Aaron said, the expectations, that's what they should be. And he mentioned, when you're the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, he didn't talk about just being Aaron Rodgers. He's talking about the legacy from Bart Starr on to Brett and into him. Like, he understands that pressure. And typically, Jenna, he's thrived in that pressure. Nick mentioned he's the best player. All these other things, the biggest challenges, Carolina and Minnesota. So the question is it realistic? Yeah, it's realistic because who Aaron Rodgers is. Well, let's look at the probability. Well, the probability is not as good because of Carolina and Minnesota and the problems that they present. This is not a great matchup for Green Bay. Even with Aaron Rodgers, the defense, the problems they'll present, and how good are the wide receivers at Green Bay? Like, we just give them benefit of the doubt. Oh, Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Jordy Nelson will reappear. All these guys will start making plays, but they have to make a lot of big plays to be able to help Aaron Rodgers out because we don't know how mobile he's going to be. We don't know how many chances he's going to take outside the pocket. So other guys have to step up, and that's their wide receivers. So it's it's realistic. Yeah. Can he go to Carolina and beat them, then beat Minnesota next week, and then close out with Detroit in week number 17? Yes, but this is one of the biggest tasks that Aaron Rodgers has had his whole career, because the team has put them in this hole where they have no margin of error.
Here's my question for you. We talk a lot about missing practice and what that does. When you're playing when you are an elite athlete like Aaron Rodgers, he plays the game almost by rote. He knows it. It's slow. He gets it. He knows what has to be. He knows his personnel. He knows his receivers so well. Does it even matter that he hasn't, or maybe how much does it matter that he really hasn't practiced with the team a lot, where he can just go out there and everything sort of comes back to him?
Well, practice always matters, and it will matter for Aaron. Just like Tom Brady, the last 3 Wednesdays, he hadn't practiced on last 3 Wednesdays, he didn't practice. So we've seen the result on Sunday and in the Monday night game where he hadn't been as sharp. Everyone needs practice. What it does also for the other players, the other players have more confidence when they go onto the field. So practice will always be an important ingredient for me as far as determining what guys are going to do on and off the field. We can't remove practice and think that people are going to get better. Now, Aaron Rodgers is really special, and a lot of the things that he's doing out of shotgun, you don't need a lot of practice for.
I want to go to the thing you mentioned and I touched on, which is the playoff streak. Because I just want to talk about the teams that have made the playoffs 9 straight years. Because that's the record. The record is 9 straight years. It is the San Francisco 49ers in their heyday. Hall of Famers all over the place. Right, CC?
Yes.
That's the team that, by the way, the Patriots were trying to tie their record for consecutive road wins. That team won 18 straight road games. They weren't just making the playoffs. They were winning 11, 12 games almost every year.
Yes.
And you had Hall of Famers on offense, on defense, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, the greatest wide receiver of all time, no disrespect, one of the greatest safeties of all time. The Niners, they did it 9 straight times. The Colts, with a Mount Rushmore quarterback, Hall of Famer in Marvin Harrison, Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis. I know the defenses weren't necessarily well-rounded, but they had elite talent. The New England Patriots are going to tie that record. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, greatest coach-quarterback combo ever. And then the Packers, if they make the playoffs this year. Man, what Hall of Famers is Aaron Rodgers playing with? What all-pros Aaron Rodgers playing with? Think about the company he would join.
Yes.
It is Pantheon teams. Yeah. He has not been on Pantheon teams. I understand they had Julius Peppers for part of the run. I'm not going to act like our pal Greg Jennings, who is a very good pro, but he would tell you not a Hall of Famer. They've had good players. But those other teams are some of the greatest teams ever for that sustained run. 9 straight playoff bursts. Only 3 teams have ever done it. That's what the Packers are trying to join.
Right, and that's why it's realistic to say, can Aaron Rodgers do this? And what he's been up against, and he's done it with less than anyone that we've seen in the modern era, besides Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady has done less from a wide receiver standpoint, but the team surrounding the coach and the organization have always put a winner out there where how many would have been in a row if Tom hadn't gotten hurt? The Castle year.
Oh, yeah. Well, then it would be, they missed it after they won their first Super Bowl. So it would be 03 to now. Okay. So they'd be on 15 if not for the Matt Castle year. And that Matt Castle year, they won.
Right, so Green Bay would be in the same breath.
Right.
Because I don't believe that they will make it. And they'll be in the same way as Tom Brady. Last time he didn't make it, when he got hurt. Green Bay, because Aaron Rodgers missing all those games.
But, boy, if they do make it, imagine having him lost the time that he did with the team that they have making the playoffs. But we should mention, it's not like he's going to have an easy go at it. It's not like when Dak was facing the Giants and needed a good game. These guys are playing a very good Carolina defense. Next up for them, a very good Minnesota defense. And then they've got Detroit. So he's got a tough 3 weeks ahead of him.
It's the hardest schedule remaining in the league.
Yes.
They are, I mean, that's not, I'm not just, I mean, as far as wins for your opponent, they're playing 3 straight winning teams, 2 teams that are in the playoffs, 1 team that's looking at a bye in Minnesota. If Detroit, I'm down on Detroit, but they're still 7-6. If Detroit's your easy game, then that speaks to how difficult your schedule is the rest of the way.
Moving on to 40-year-old Tom Brady, who looked 41 Monday night with 2 interceptions
51.
and a loss to the Dolphins. But 41 was funnier. Lucky for him, because that's what I was going for there. Lucky for him, he gets to face the 11-2 Steelers this week, she said sarcastically. The Steelers are good, but Tom Brady owns this team, 10-2 against them in his career. Here's Brady on the team moving on from a very disappointing loss.
I think everyone took this one pretty hard. You know, the locker room's not in very good spirits, and the plane flight home was very quiet. You know, the ability for us to learn from it and move forward is what we're going to need to do, because I think we've always felt that one loss shouldn't become two shouldn't become three, because that's where it really turns into a bad season. So we got to figure out a way to play a lot better, and like I said, I'm confident we'll put together a good plan. I think there'll be a lot of urgency and knowing what we're up against, and we'll go out and try to put together our best game of the year.
See, so you said something interesting yesterday. You said that Tom Brady, coming off the loss, was going to be more fired up than Tom Brady basically coming off the win, that watch out for Tom Brady after what happened to them in Miami. That being said, what should we expect from him following what happened Monday night?
You can hear in the interview, he talks about not letting one disappointment or one loss turn into 2 losses, or 2 losses turn into 3 losses. This is not what New England does. But all players are focused. But when you have adversity, especially the great players, there's a different type of focus, and we call it a fine focus. And that's where you don't have any distractions, and you're able to really concentrate on the small things in the game plan. Now, what is New England doing offensively? Last week, they tried to do some different things because Gronk wasn't there. Hogan was coming back his first game. So they had a lot of moving parts. Tom Brady, last 3 Wednesdays, has not practiced. So the overall continuity of the offense was not there. Their third down package, he will be focused on that. How can I keep the Steelers off the field? They know that they can't perform the way they did on third down against Miami. Also, from a protection standpoint, they will spend extra time to figure out how they can protect Tom Brady, because ultimately, Tom Brady, it's more than just an offensive game plan. He realized, I'm going against Big Ben. This is not Jay Cutler and the Dolphins. This is not Josh McCown. This is not Tyrod. Like, they realize what they're up against. Now, they know that they've had success over a period of time, so what they'll do is go back through those 12 games that they've played, 10 of those Tom Brady victories over the Steelers, and they will pick out certain things that they've done and implement them into Sunday's game. This is the biggest game in New England, outside of a playoff game, in a long time. How many more times is Tom Brady going to be in position to have the #1 seed? How many more years? We just can't keep taking this for granted.
Right.
We wondered if he would get to 5 Super Bowls. If he don't get I mean, he could get to 7. But he can't get there if they're not the #1 seed. Why? Because they've never won a Super Bowl where they didn't have a bye. So watch the third down package. Watch the duplication of things that they've been successful at before against Pittsburgh. Now, there's one thing now. Most of those defenses were against the legendary defensive coordinator, Dick LeBeau, who's now gone on to coach in Tennessee. So their defense has changed over the last few years. So he won't be able to use all the information. But these are the things I expect from Tom, and this is the way he will attack the Pittsburgh, and knowing that Ben, L. Bell, and Antonio are getting onto the field. So third down is the biggest down for New England.
All right, so we do a funny thing, and it's not just with the Patriots, but with any team that has earned it, any team that year after year consistently displays excellence. We, especially before big games, make sure that the discussion going into it is that whatever happened the week before is good for them. So I'm delighted that my partner's Cris Carter, because so many people this week are going to be explaining how it's so good for the Patriots that they lost last week. That they're glad they lost last week.
I feel a stat coming on.
No. It's not even. I'm going to go a different angle. How absurd would it be? Let's say the Patriots crushed the Dolphins on Monday night. Obviously, I picked the Steelers to win the Super Bowl. I've been on the Steelers this year. If I came on here on Tuesday and I was like, nothing's better for Pittsburgh than the fact that New England just crushed Miami. It's awesome for Pittsburgh. New England's coming off a great win. That would sound ridiculous. But what you've heard this week is how good it is for New England that they're coming off a loss. That it's actually the fact that Pittsburgh now has footage of, oh, this is something that worked against New England. This is something that Miami, a lesser team than us, was able to do against New England. Somehow that plays to New England's advantage. I don't buy into that at all. I don't buy into the idea that it is an edge for the team as a whole that they lost the game. Now, I agree with Cece that Tom Brady, part of his excellence is, what was I not good at? I want to make sure I'm better at it next week. But I think he'd be doing that even in a win, right?
Losses force you to do things you can't do winning. It's hard to have the same amount of focus when you're successful that disappointment and failure brings you. Yes, you prepare, but when you lose the number 1 seed, all right? Well, they were in the driver's seat. That's what they lost on Monday night. They also lost a game in the division, which they don't do. The way Belichick presents the information, you would have thought they lost a playoff game. You heard Tom Brady. The locker room, a lot of disappointment. The airplane, man, there wasn't a whole bunch of noise on the airplane. They do not enjoy losing, and they go about it the right way. That's why they win so much.
Well, Well,
you think, well, all teams, well, why don't they do that?
No, that's not what I was going to say. Explain this to me, because one of the things we talk about with New England that we give them credit for and that we show the dichotomy between them and a team like Pittsburgh is they are never focused a week ahead or a week behind. That they are always singularly focused on just the next thing in front of them. That's different if the week behind is a loss, because they wouldn't be focused on what happened in the Miami game at all had they won the game.
Listen, to me, my analysis of this game has nothing to do with Pittsburgh. It's everything to do with everything that I've seen with New England and Bill Belichick. When I was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, played there 3 years. The defense coordinator of the New York Giants was Bill Belichick. So I started studying him in 1987. It wasn't 7 weeks ago. So it's him being there, him being in Cleveland, all the things they've done, and Tom Brady. I'm not saying that losing the game. I'm trying to tell you what the greatest players do when they lose compared to winning, and what losing forces you to do from a preparation standpoint.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do we know what the numbers are of how successful the Patriots have been coming off a loss?
Since 2016, they're 3-0 coming off a loss, and Brady's 8 touchdowns to 1 pick. And that sounds amazing, but the reality is, like, Brady 8 touchdowns to 1 pick, that's almost his ratio in any game since 2016.
What's pathetic is it's only coming off 3 games. I mean, that's
your sample size.
There you go.
That
was a very small sample size.
Yeah, because they don't lose, and they don't allow 1 loss to turn into 2 losses.
Right, and that was Brady's point, right? Was that this is something that that's how they avoid. That's why they are 9 straight years in the playoffs. It's why they more often than not have a bye. It's because they don't have bad stretches of football.
And also, they got real pressure on them. They got real pressure. I mean, they were leading the NFL, and now all of a sudden, second NFL behind Philadelphia. Philadelphia gets the injury, but they're sitting there to be the number 1 seed. If you have to go to Gillette, you can mark them being in the Super Bowl. But now, what they're looking at, they can fall to the 3 seed, not have a bye. This is a huge game. So also I have that into the formula of why they'll concentrate in this game and why they'll be dialed in. Now, Pittsburgh can still beat them, but the preparation, we have to give them credit because they've done it and been more consistent at it than any organization.
I want to clarify one thing I said real quick. Tom Brady 3-0 since 2016 following a loss, because one of those losses was when he was suspended. So, and by the way, they won the game after when it was Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback anyway. But the point CC made about the 1 seed, I just want people to understand it. If the Pats lose this game, they can't get the 1 seed. It's not they're unlikely to get the 1 seed. It's not. It's
and
tough.
Take it one step further. Without the 1 seed, they've never won the Super Bowl?
They've never gone to the Super Bowl without being a top 2 seed.
Okay.
The top 2 seed gets a bye. They've never gone to a Super Bowl. They've been to 7 under Brady and Belichick. Every single year they've had a bye. So they still would be eligible for the bye, but they would not be eligible to get the 1 seed if they lose on Sunday. Flip side, if they win on Sunday, they're the big favorite to get the 1 seed. That's how big, to CeCe's point, this game is.
Welcome back to First Things First. Welcoming Greg Jennings. Greg, great to have you. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
talking about your team today. A little Packer action. Can you still root for the Packers? Is it hard not to just root for the Packers?
I really don't root for any specific team.
Good job.
Yeah,
I
nicely
taught him well.
said,
I
Greg.
taught him well.
Very
He's an
good.
expert on the Packers.
Absolutely.
But I don't root for no one.
I like it.
I root for a bunch of teams. I got an AFC team, an NFC team. I got some players.
Yeah,
Well,
you can do that.
Your pocketbook
But when you
is
cash,
involved.
when you cash checks from organizations, yes, there is a connection. But I'm cashing these checks, so my connection is with Fox.
Without
so I got to
question.
get. So typically, I have to criticize them.
Gotcha. All right, here we go. Dear Aaron Rodgers and Ezekiel Elliott, no pressure or anything, but can you come back and win every remaining game for your respective teams? Aaron to the Packers this week, Zeke to the Cowboys next week. Both big returns, both teams at 7-6. Both need to win 3 straight to make the playoffs. So the Packers face the Carolina Panthers. Won't be that easy. Cowboys face the Raiders. Also probably won't be that easy. Greg, who is more likely to make the playoffs? The Packers or the Cowboys, obviously factoring in the big assets they're going to get back.
Okay, let's just say they get help from everyone.
Oh, they need a lot of help.
Because they need a lot of help.
Clearly.
Both teams, I like the remaining Dallas Cowboys schedule for them. They have Seattle at home, which Seattle is a completely different team on the road. When you look at the Packers, they have Carolina away this week,
right?
Minnesota at home, and then they go to Detroit, another team that is ahead of them,
yes,
with 7 wins, that it can come down to that last game.
And has given Green Bay problems through the years.
In Detroit. And so, and there's a huge but, one team gets their guy back this week, being the Green Bay Packers, and the other team has to wait 1 more week, being Ezekiel Elliott and the Dallas Cowboys. With that said, I have to go with the Green Bay Packers because when you look at even the Carolina Panthers coming off a win, Cam Newton typically plays a little different. If he was coming off a loss, I would give the advantage, and I still kind of give the advantage to the Carolina Panthers, but I trust Aaron Rodgers.
What you're saying that Cam Newton coming off a win is not going to build on that momentum.
He typically doesn't have a monster game.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't have a great game.
He
didn't have a great game last week.
No, they just got the win.
Absolutely.
Right.
They got the win.
Run, yeah.
Yeah, Greg makes good points as far as who he would take. Green Bay, they get their star back this week. Dallas' season could be over before Zeke is reinstated.
Right.
They could lose in Oakland. 7-7 there, that's a wrap. It's Wrap City. He can come back and play, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, their season will be over with. So, huge advantage. Also, Dallas has the worst head-to-head. I mean, Dallas is the 10th seed now in a in a 6th seed playoff. So, I mean, they need Jesus, a few other miracles to happen before Ezekiel even gets back. I mean, does Green Bay have a tough schedule? I mean, if you're a betting man, the numbers are in Green Bay's percentage. Also, it's the player in Aaron Rodgers. How many players he's going to make better immediately, and he gets to do it this week. He gets to affect the team this week compared to waiting another week. So Green Bay is definitely more likely, but neither one of these teams is going to make the playoffs. We're going to the playoffs without either one of them being there.
So Chris's point about the tiebreakers is an important one. Like if Dallas finishes at 10-6, it's very unlikely that if there's just one other team at 10-6, if they're 10-6 and I don't know, say the Packers are 10-6, well, guess what? The Packers go. If they're 10-6 and the Falcons are 10-6, well, guess what? The Falcons go. So those tiebreakers now matter. Now, obviously, Dallas can get the tiebreaker with Seattle if they end up winning that football game. I'm struggling with this similarly to what Greg was, because one team obviously has the harder schedule. Green Bay has the hardest remaining schedule in football. They have a 9-win team this week. They have a 10-win team the following week, then a 7-win Detroit team. But the reality to me is this. The Cowboys over the last month have been exposed to a degree that I think even when Zeke comes back, they're going to pay some penalty for it. I think we thought teams were focused on stopping Ezekiel Elliott before. now that they've really seen, maybe I was a man on an island, but I bet there are some teams in the league, some coaches in the league that thought, like, at least similarly to how I thought, which was that, man, Dak Prescott can beat you now. And now that we've seen a month of it, that clearly Dak Prescott is not a guy right now in his career that you have to really be concerned about him going out and beating you. We thought they were focused on stopping the run before. They're going to, when Zeke comes back, if there was 8 men in the box 70% of the time, that's about to be 90% of the time. And not just because of Dak, but because we've seen over the last month, it's not that Dez Bryant needs to get back to what he once was. Dez Bryant is never getting back to what he once was. And so I think the Cowboys are so much easier to game plan against even when Zeke gets back than what the Packers will be. And the other thing that hurt the Cowboys is this. I don't think Philly's going to have the 1 seed locked up anymore. Not that Nick Foles is the quarterback now. So Week 17 in Philly is not a game that is going to be thrown away like Week 17 the Cowboys did last year when they were 13-2 and they rested guys. Like, you're going to be playing 2 teams after Oakland in Seattle and Philadelphia, one that's fighting for its playoff life, the other that could be fighting for the 1 or the 2 seed. Like, I don't see Dallas getting to the 10 wins, so I see the answer is the Green Bay Packers.
Greg, if teams now are seeing exactly what's missing on this Cowboys team and that maybe it's not just about Zeke and about Dak, how is that any different than what's happening with the Packers? I mean, yes, their running game is a little bit better, but all you got to do is go in. They've seen how they've been exposed. Just go in, do everything you can to make sure you're making things as complicated as possible for Aaron Rodgers. I know it seems easy on paper. I know that. But it's not like anyone else has really stepped up the same way no one's really stepped up with the Cowboys.
Well, it's different when you're talking about the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers because they've experienced not having a running game and still have had success, still have gone to the NFC Championship, still has been to 8 consecutive years of playoffs. So we've seen them have success without a running game. Even if they have a fraction, let's just say they have actually half of the running game that they've experienced the last few weeks, that makes them even a bigger threat. But to your point with teams playing who are already playoff bound, but still having to play at the end of the year with the Eagles. When I look at the Green Bay Packers, next week they have, and I'm not trying to look over the Carolina Panthers, but let's say they take care of business.
Right.
They have Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings this week have Cincinnati Bengals. They take care of business there. Minnesota now has a 12 or 10, 11 and 3 record. Yep. They would have clinched their division. We don't know, again, with Philly, they could still get the 1 seed.
Right.
So they're going to play. So it's going to be a tough road for both of these teams. And when you look at the tougher road, who would you rather have at the helm? Because the quarterback position is everything now. Aaron Rodgers.
All right, let's switch gears. Back to the NBA now. Paul George returned to Indiana for the first time last night. Didn't exactly receive a warm welcome, which by my voice should let you know he was booed mercilessly. Wasn't a great game for George, just 12 points on 3 of 14, but he did hit 2 late free throws to help ice the win for OKC. Here's George after the game.
I understood what the environment was going to be coming into it, so it wasn't a surprise. And my teammates did a great job of helping me battle this one tonight. Just kept everything within that that rectangle out there, and just trusted in my guys.
Hey Nick, they got the win. Were you impressed with the Thunder last night?
No.
Okay.
No, I was really concerned with the Thunder last night. Like, CC made an interesting point off the air yesterday during the show that sometimes we focus too much on these shows on negative stuff. Instead of building guys up, talking about some of the good stories, we talk about this guy's not any good, this guy's not any good, this team stinks. And
that being said.
So I tried to keep that in mind when we were thinking about what we were going to do today on the show, just kind of in commentary in general, because I think it's a good point. Especially early in the morning, people want to be optimistic, happy. So this morning, I knew we were going to talk about the Thunder. I was like, man, I'd like to find something to be like, yeah, but here's the thing. Man, there ain't nothing I can find aside from the fact they got that win. I understand Indiana's a good team this year. You'd say, oh, a road win in Indiana. They got this road win in Indiana because Steven Adams was awesome. Alex Sabrina's played one of the better games he's ever played. Yes. Like, their stars, Russ, George, Melo, combined to go 10 for 45. That's 22.2% from the field. They're 3 stars, 10 for 45. None of them had a good game. And it is a trend now. We are almost 30 games in, and these guys haven't gotten any better at playing together. It'd be one thing if it was like, okay, they're still herky-jerky, but they have moments of it. We're not even seeing stretches where it's like, oh, that's what they could be.
So is the key word there together? If you were coaching this team, would you just maybe separate them? Because together, there's no success. Could you divvy the minutes up a little bit so maybe they're not all on the court at the same time? Because clearly that's not working.
No, we talked about that yesterday. Would Melo embrace being the sixth man? Because Paul George is a superstar. Westbrook is a superstar. Between George and Westbrook last night, they had 9 turnovers. So aesthetically, not a pretty game. I don't think that would work. It's easy to say because we saw in Cleveland, Dwayne Wade, he was a starter, and J.R. Smith came in for. I don't see a player that's better to start in OKC. So you just can't. You only got 12 players. You got to put 5 out there to start the game. And the positive thing from it, Nick, is they are an elite defensive team.
Yeah,
now,
true.
We would have not even thought that these 3 players coming together, they would be elite defensively. But OKC, that's what they are this year. So that's your morning spin on it. Yeah. They're positive. I mean, right. That's the positive thing. They are great defensively. And why should you be encouraged? Because that's the hardest part of the game to play. The offense, the isolation, because that's what they do. Dribble, pick and roll, ISO, that part right there, the coach needs to change. They need a more move the ball, a more motion type of offense, or play fast. And when they play fast, Russ turns the ball over too much. So as a coach, if I was making adjustments, I would make sure that they realize they're playing great on the defensive end. They are an elite team on the defense. But what's going to be the formula offensive? And because we can't continue just to be a ISO one-on-one team.
To Cece's point, they're top 3 defense in the NBA right now. And that is something no one saw coming. I think people thought they would struggle. I didn't know you. First of all, I didn't know you knew it, but I'm delighted you do. But no one saw them being a top 10 defensive team, much less top 3. To Jenna's point about the minutes, even if Melo has to start, which I don't think he does, but regardless, this is where Billy Donovan could stagger the substitution pattern better. If these guys are having trouble playing with all 3 together on the court, you could, if you staggered your substitutions, make it aside from the very beginning.
But they're not having trouble playing together. They've had 9, 10-point leads this year that they've lost the game.
Right. Because Cece, but they've lost.
Did they get the lead playing together?
No, but that's my point. Where they've struggled is at the end of games when all 3 are on the court.
But they got the lead with all guys on the court.
No, I don't think that's accurate. I think they got the lead when the one guy's on the bench, when it's 2 of the 3. Second and third quarter, when guys are resting. In the fourth quarter, when you're playing everybody, these guys just listen. There's 33 guys in the NBA. Show this, please. 33 guys in the NBA taking at least 15 shots a game. Who are the 34 guys? Pardon me. Who are the 3 worst? It's now the 3 worst are these guys from field goal percentage standpoint. Billy Donovan talked about it after the game. He said he doesn't think guys are forcing shots. He thinks the problem is these guys, for the first time in their career, are going 5-6 possessions without touching the ball. Then when they do touch the ball, they're open, and it's unfamiliar to them. If you staggered their minutes a little bit better, they would go fewer possessions. So
you're going to stagger it now in the fourth quarter? Because they're leading. They had 9, 10-point leads. They lost that. So now what are you going to do in the fourth quarter? It's 12 minutes. You got 3 superstars. All you got to do is manage the last 12 minutes.
Your point there is a totally fair one, which is if my solution is stagger the minutes so it's more often than not 2 of the 3 on the court, does that mean, forget 12 minutes, the last 4 minutes of the game, one of those guys is going to be on the bench? You didn't bring them in to not have them all there at the end of the game.
Put Paul George on the bench, he leaves as a free agent. You put Melo on the bench, he's got $28 million guaranteed next year, and he's not happy.
Right. No, and Russ obviously can't be on the bench. But what I know right now is 3 of 17, 4 of 14, 3 of 14. That's not...
That's shooting. That's them shooting the ball.
Right, but don't you think part of the reason they're shooting poorly is because they're not playing in rhythm, because they're not comfortable together, and that they've got to figure out a way in the meantime? The season, we're 27 games in now. You don't have a ton of time to do a lot of tinkering before you...
They have not shot the ball well. And if they played up and down and took some easier shots compared to, they're taking the toughest shots too. All right, they're shooting a lot of threes. Paul George shooting 7 threes last night. It don't make sense. He took 13 shots, 7 threes. Like, stop.
So not a Billy Donovan problem.
Let's blame the coach.
I'm not blaming the coach, but the coach's job is...
These guys are the 3 worst shooters. You saw the graphic. I mean, I believe America can read. All right? These guys have been at the top level shooters. They're not shooting well. Now it's the coach's fault.
While everyone's busy touting the Warriors and the Celtics and the Cavs, the Houston Rockets are quietly boasting the best record in the NBA, or in other words, they're really good. They beat the Hornets 108-96 last night. Chris Paul chipped in 31 points and 11 assists, and they've won 11 straight since CP3 returned from injury. Nick, why do you think it is the Rockets don't get more love as potential contenders in the NBA?
Well, we have been conditioned over the last few years, and understandably so, to believe 2 teams can win the title. The team LeBron plays for or the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Like that's, and there have been reason for that.
Yeah, 3 years in a row.
3 years in a row. It's the first time in NBA history the same 2 teams played each other 3 years consecutively in the finals. And so we've overlooked the fact that just a few years ago, without another All-Star playing more than half the season, James Harden led the Rockets to the 2 seed and 56 wins in the Western Conference Finals. That the Rockets had, of every team in the league, I believe, the biggest offseason acquisition. As far as, you can say the Celtics, but the Celtics had to give up a player in Isaiah Thomas. Rockets got Chris Paul. I know it was a trade, but they didn't have to trade another superstar. And the Rockets are quietly right about the best offense in the history of the NBA. I want to say that again. Prior to last night's game dinged them a couple tenths of a point. Going into last night's game, according to Basketball Reference, they had the single best offense in the history of the league. Now, another team on that list for best offenses in the history of the league is this year's Warriors and last year's Warriors. And so we're always going to focus on the Warriors. But the Rockets right now have elite point guard play for 48 minutes a night and 2 of the best 8 players in the league on one team. Only the Warriors can say that as well, 2 of the best 8 players. So, yeah, the Rockets are legitimate contenders, and we don't talk about them because they're in Houston and because Harden has had some bad playoff moments, as had CP3. I think that's why people don't want to take them seriously yet, CC.
And who's their coach?
Mike D'Antoni.
Mike D'Antoni. They don't take because Chris Paul hadn't been successful in the postseason. Harden hadn't been successful in the postseason. And the head coach, his system hasn't been successful in the postseason. So we've looked for teams to emerge in the West, but we thought, oh, it'd be San Antonio. We thought potentially Minnesota. They got a good young team. They added Jimmy Butler. We've been on the Clippers for the last couple years that they might emerge and be one of the top teams in the West. So that's the reasons why we haven't talked about Houston. Houston is having the most special season, so the attention would be warranted. What makes them so different? Their offense, with their coach. Their coach has always been a great offensive mind. Their offense is even more efficient than it's ever been. So that's the reason why they're starting to get the notoriety. But to me, the big difference is when they're not shooting the ball, when they're not scoring the ball, what are they doing? Well, they've added a couple players, and that being Chris Paul and P.J. Tucker. And in doing that, when they have laws offensively, they're better defensively now. So now they have the best offense in the history of the NBA. But when you have these laws, we've seen with Golden State. Golden State is better defensively, even though they get all the credit for their offense. Houston is doing the same thing. They are better defensively, especially in those critical moments. And when their offense is having a lull or they are sputtering, their defense picks them up. And that's what's led them to having the best record in the NBA.
This show started coming together over the summer when all these different trades and things were happening and there were eye-opening moves, and we started focusing on all the really big names, the Carmelo Anthony, the Kyrie Irving, the Isaiah Thomas going here, all the moving and shaking. And I think that we quietly, even though we knew that Chris Paul was going to Houston, like it was just a thing. I don't know if anyone really thought Chris Paul and James Harden were going to gel that well together. But there were all these other storylines that coming into this season we were so focused on. We got to know Lonzo, what's happening with Boston, what's happening with Cleveland. And quietly, without much pressure, Mike D'Antoni has been able to coach a team with two stars together, one who's played really well by himself, the way Russell Westbrook, but when you added players to Russell Westbrook's mode, it didn't work as well. But now you bring Chris Paul in, all of a sudden, he's been able to coach two players very successfully, and this team's playing very well.
And I give D'Antoni credit for that, but I also give Chris Paul and James Harden credit for it. Because, Chris, we talked off the air over the summer when this happened that I was like, listen, I'm a huge James Harden guy. I'm a huge Chris Paul guy. I didn't think the pairing, I thought the one team Chris Paul wouldn't be hugely additive to would be the Houston Rockets because James Harden does so many of the same things. They instantly gelled. And one thing you mentioned about D'Antoni and his playoff success, it is true when you go through the history books, like look at the team's regular season, what they did in the postseason, and I know you know this, but for people out there that crush D'Antoni, I think it's a little unfair. 1 year that they absolutely could have won the title. In the playoffs, Joe Johnson breaks his face, and that derails them. Another year, they absolutely could win the title. Robert Horry hip checks Steve Nash. Amari Stoudemire then gets suspended for the critical game of that series. Those 7 seconds or less Suns teams, they did not win a title because of bad coaching, at least not in my estimation. They had some bad luck, and they ran up against some really, really good teams. So I think D'Antoni's gotten an unfair rap in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a good offensive coach, but when you look at it, what are holes in his coaching theory? On the defensive end, he hadn't had a huge emphasis on defense. And when you get to the playoffs, you can't go up and down, up and down, up and down. Now they're relying on the three-pointer, which is different because that's the way the NBA has changed. When you get to the playoff, you got to get stops. You got to be able to stop people and turn people over. And that's that overall mentality. They've added that through free agency, which I believe makes them a special team.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.